What's up, everybody? Welcome to S.W.A.T MMA. We're smoking weed and we're talking mixed martial arts. This is episode number 118. I'm Jarrod here with Paul.
What up?
Coming to you from the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas. Today, we're going to be smoking and talking all about the UFC with a prediction and preview for the big Font versus Aldo Bantamweight showdown. We're going to be discussing Bellator with a Bantamweight title bout of their own, which sees Pettis take on Horiguchi. And we're going to be smoking and talking boxing with George Kambosos' stunning upset of Teófimo López. Before we get into all the combat sports, you know what time it is. Grab your weed, fire it up, and let's get into the weed of the week.
Smoke weed every day.
This week, we have added one new flower to our now growing pile of cannabis we're smoking today. We got 4 different things we're smoking, but we've added some super lemon haze, which is what we are puffing on in this joint right now. It's supposed to be a nice lemon flavor. I never get that as much as I do the smell.
Yeah, I feel like smells are usually more than like actual taste.
At least with the lemon. I mean, I get a lot of orange terpenes, you know, in like Tropicana cookies and things like that.
Yeah.
And tangy, but with the lemon strains, I always get it on smell in the bag, never much on the flavor. But Super Lemon Haze is a cross of lemon skunk and silver haze. Lemon skunk is a rare one. I've never actually smoked that, Paul, but it is a cross of just 2 skunk phenotypes that had a real lemony terps. Silver haze is haze number 1 crossed with Northern Lights. Northern Lights, a classic. I never see that anywhere anymore either, do you?
Northern Lights, no. Northern Lights is, I always think of like in The Office. Northern Lights.
Do you?
Yeah,
When he goes to buy the weed and it's the basil salad?
No, when Dwight's interrogating everyone and he's showing the picture of weed to everyone. He's like, "What is this?" And everyone's like, "Weed." And then Creed goes on. He's like, "What is that?" That's Northern Lights. That shit always.
We've also got Platinum OG, Mob Boss, and Tropaya Pie sitting here on the table today that we're going to be indulging in as well. I forgot about that part of The Office. The only thing I could think of was when he tried to set up Toby with the basil salad that he went and bought from Vance's Refrigeration guys. He gave him like $500.
Yeah, that shit's funny.
Except for £1 and he got a bag of salad. That was funny too.
That shit was funny as fuck.
I've been re-watching Friends lately.
Yeah.
As well, and there's a surprising number of cannabis references in Friends.
Is there?
And Phoebe's brownies and things of that nature. I never really noticed it back in the day. But whatever you're smoking on out there, folks, we hope it's as delicious as what we've got. And hopefully, wherever you are, it's either legal or about to be legal soon. Let's go ahead and dive into the combat sports. Paul, I'd like to talk about the big Bantamweight showdown going on in Bellator, because it might be flying under the radar for a lot of people who might not be understanding the situation between Horiguchi, the Bantamweight title, and former UFC fighter Sergio Pettis, brother of Anthony Pettis, former UFC lightweight champ.
And Bellator Bantamweight champion.
Yes, absolutely. This is his first title defense, but he's defending a title that Horiguchi never really lost, correct?
Yeah. So he Pettis won the vacated title in his last fight against Juan Archuleta.
Well, Archuleta picked up the vacated title. Then in his first defense, he promptly lost it.
See, I thought they fought for the vacated title, but oh yeah, that's right. Archuleta beat Patchy Mix for the vacated title, then lost to
exactly.
Pettis.
He lost.
Okay.
To Pettis.
Okay. Now it's all coming back. The marijuana's attack.
And now we've got Horiguchi, who had won the title against Darren Caldwell.
Yeah.
In a crossover event, came over as the Risen champion.
Mm-hmm. After he defended the belt against Caldwell before, too.
Right. It was this cool cross-promotion thing that Bellator and Risen had done where the Bellator guy came over and fought their champ and then the other way around. And so Horiguchi gets the title. But then he injures his knee, right? Because he beats Darren Caldwell in 2019, June 24th, at Bellator 222 by decision, and that was in New York.
Yeah.
That was Bellator's big New York card, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then he hurts his knee. Correct?
Yeah.
So then he vacates the title.
I was like, is that a question?
Yeah, so he hurts his knee and vacates the title.
Yeah.
Then he goes back to Risen, and then in kind of like a comeback bout, which is a non-title bout. I guess they never really stated why, but I've always assumed it's to check his rehabbed knee.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not really certain on the time frame of that. But anyway, he gets knocked out by Kiya Asakara in what was supposed to be a showcase fight, an easy win for him. But he keeps the title. This was in Japan. And then December 31st, 2020, he comes back against Kiya Asakara. Excuse me, that's a mouthful for me. I don't know why. And then TKOs him in the first round in a title fight.
Yeah. So now he takes on Sergio, who pretty much has his belt at this point. So
even Sergio admits that he's not. It's really Horiguchi's belt that he's been holding this whole time, and this will kind of unify the.
I would never say that, but
the whole lineal thing. Well, Sergio did.
That's such
so basically, what you just said is an admitation from you. You've admitted that the lineal belt does count for something. The lineal title, because Horiguchi is the lineal champion in Bellator.
But this is an interesting matchup because Sergio Pettis, I feel like, has like really evolved in like the last 2 years into a real complete fighter. Like people always think that like him and his brother fight like similar, but like just because they're brothers, they are two complete different guys. People always kind of lump them together, obviously because they're brothers. But that being said, I feel like he's really carved like a whole new like part of his game out with his wrestling and his like being able to set it up with his striking. And that like I feel like he's on a whole nother level than when he was in the UFC. Like I wonder how it would go if he were to like go back at this point.
Well, he did have a rough patch in the UFC. You know, he was 16-2. He beat current champ Brendan Moreno by decision. Yeah. Then he fought Henry Cejudo, and he lost. Then he gets a win against Joseph Benavidez in a split decision, right, which is strong. But then he has back-to-back losses against Jussier Formiga and Rob Font, who we're going to be talking about later. Then he gets a win over Tyson Nam, and then leaves the UFC after that. So he left on a bit of a an up and down bit.
Well, a big part of him leaving to begin with was originally the UFC was getting rid of the whole 125 division. Remember, and then he moves up to 35 and fought Font and lost to Rob Font. He honestly should have never even fought Rob Font at that point because his whole thing was he went up to 35 because the UFC was closing the 125 division.
He went back down to flyweight back in early 2015.
Yeah.
And then had the series of fights, and that's what we're talking about, the current flyweight champion, Moreno, et cetera. Yes, but then because they were going to close it down. Because they were going to
close the division, he moves up to bantamweight. So had the UFC not done that bullshit, who even knows if he'd be fighting 135 pounds at this point? Like, honestly. But, so now...
I mean, he did leave as a flyweight, though, because he fought Tyson Nam as a flyweight.
Yeah.
Because the UFC, again, they're all over the place.
All over the place with their decision-making, and that's... I feel like that's what really led him to leaving the UFC to begin with. Like, they never really put any kind of like promotion behind him. He had big fights. Like I thought after he fought Benavidez and got the win there, I thought he was going to fight the winner of Cejudo and Mighty Mouse, which would have made a lot of sense at the time considering he was like fourth in the division and Benavidez was number 1. But you know how the UFC goes. They're fucking stupid. But
especially at that time with the way the division was.
Yeah. So I just feel like the UFC really lost like a star in Sergio Pettis, and now that he's moved on to Bellator, like this is a huge fight. Like people that don't like necessarily watch Bellator or Ryzen, like these are probably the two best champions in the at least like all the lower weight classes. Like there's really no big stars in Ryzen as big as Horiguchi, and I think Pettis is the biggest star in Bellator at this point if he continues to be champion because there's just no real big stars coming out of Bellator right now.
Well, I mean, they have some big stars over in Risen, but the problem is they keep losing. Like they've signed Eddie Alvarez and some others, but they haven't done too well.
That's one, yeah.
But Horiguchi, like you said, he's their big guy. it's an important win for him. I think he signed to Bellator now for a series of fights, so he's got a bit of a contract.
Yeah, they have
as
this,
far as I
like,
know.
yeah, they have this weird like understanding Bellator and freaking Rise and do where they like trade guys all the time because they always do that end of year New Year's card where they have it's always Bellator versus Rise and every single year they do that. But then also I've noticed like a lot it's almost like a feeder organization sometimes. Like they send some of their bigger guys over to Bellator for the bigger fights, and then like that Horiguchi and Darren Caldwell fight that made Ryzen look so much better than it already was when he came in and beat Caldwell because it made it look like they're equals. You know what I mean? Like, see, our champions are just as good as yours. And that's the whole reason why fucking UFC won't do those cross promotion fights.
Well, they don't want to. I mean, look, Horiguchi fought Demetrius Johnson at UFC 186 on April of 2015.
Yeah.
For the title, and he lost. Was it by armbar or was it by decision? I think it was armbar. I think
it was the armbar, but it was like a weird. It was weird because
wait, that was the flying armbar from
no,
DJ,
no.
wasn't it?
That was a different one. This one was he freaking dislocated his shoulder when he was in the armbar and tapped with a second to go.
So, and there's no shame whatsoever in losing to the best flyweight on the planet
ever. Yeah.
So he loses there, and that put his record at 15-2, and since then he has won every single fight except that non-title bout, which he goes and avenges in the next fight out. So there's a pretty strong argument that Horiguchi is the best. I know it's a bantamweight right now, but that's just because the way the weight classes are over and risen. It's a little bit different, but he's the best in that weight class right now. He's got a claim to it.
Yeah, at 135.
So, I think his resume is far more outstanding than Sergio Pettis. And frankly, I don't think Pettis is going to have what it takes to beat him. My prediction is Horiguchi solidifies that title once again and reclaims the title he never lost.
Yeah, see, I just feel like
I'm going to say it's a decision victory.
Decision? Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like all the chips are pretty much stacked against Sergio at this point, too, because Horiguchi not only is, like, one of the best in the world, he trains at one of the best gyms in the world, too. He trains at American Top Team. So, like, literally, he's training with some of the best guys in the world at, anywhere between 125 to 155 pounds. Like, all the best guys are at that gym. And if they're not, they're at some other branch of the gym where they'll come in for his camps and shit like that. So it's like, I don't know. Because here's my thing. I feel like the worst thing that his brother ever did was, like, stay with his camp as long as he did and never really evolve. And
Anthony?
Yeah.
With Rufus Sport in Milwaukee. Yeah, I mean, that's a great camp, but
I feel like
there's a problem when you stay forever. Look at Conor McGregor. I think he suffers from a similar situation, frankly.
Yeah, so that's only my only worry with Sergio is, like, I feel like he's made a lot of progress in the last, like since he's left the UFC the last few years, he's looked a lot better. But can it be sustained success is really what it comes down to.
I don't think against Horiguchi, and I stutter a little bit about his weight class. It's just confusing to me, at least, because in Risen, they don't cut weight. And so even DJ Demetrius Johnson, who is 125, he fights at 35 over there.
No,
is it 1FC?
Yeah, no, Ryzen does the same thing. It's confusing. It's all... That's marijuana for you, though.
Yeah, and it is, and
it's
frankly, these are promotions that I don't watch. I mean, I have to read about them. I don't watch them, so I admit that I'm a little uneducated on those promotions right now. But I think he is. If you take the UFC's 135 division out of it, okay, outside of the UFC, I think he's without a doubt the best. I don't think Pettis can fuck with him. Is he better than the current crop of the top 5 in the UFC? I don't know. I wish he was there at 135. It's hard to say.
Yeah, but I would be interested in the same breath. Like, I think if you moved him to the UFC card this weekend, and you moved him, it was him versus Aldo or him versus Font. I think those are very. You think he'd fuck them both of them?
I do. Yeah.
Really? I think it'd be 2 very interesting fights.
I've always thought Horiguchi was really, really good.
Do you?
And I think he's better up there. Where he's at 35.
Yeah.
I think cutting down to 25 was a bit much for him.
He's always been, like, in there, though. You know what I mean? That's one thing about, like, his career. Like, even when he was in the UFC after he lost to DJ, like, he's still always been in the mix. And I feel like when the UFC lost him, it was a pretty big loss. Like, to be honest, he's kind of one of those
I do
guys I
too.
thought who could have been like a UFC champion and just kind of like how when Gegard left, like he just kind of was like, I'm out, whatever. You know what I mean? I just I never understand that, to be honest. Like I get it money wise and shit like that, but if I was like a contender going into free agency, I I hate to say it, but the UFC would have me by the balls, just like the rest of these guys. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because there is like having this cult following, like Horiguchi has, where like guys like we know about his dominance since he's left the UFC and like the the whole cross brush with Bellator and stuff like that. But like to an average fan, maybe they don't know where he's been and all this shit. Now he comes back into the mix, like, oh, I know that name, but like I don't know. It's a weird situation when guys are like on on like the path towards a title and then they leave a promotion like the UFC that is literally the biggest promotion in the world.
I think when you look at the way that he wins versus the way Sergio Pettis is winning, I mean, another notch I see in Horiguchi's favor is Pettis is on like an 8-fight decision win streak. You know, 14 of his 21 wins come by decision. You know, only 3 by knockout, 4 by sub. Where you look at Horiguchi, who's 29-3, he's got 15 knockouts with only 3 subs, and then of course he's got 11 decisions. But I think that knockout ratios might show up too. Now Sergio's got a really tough chin. I don't think he's going to get KO'd, but I think he's going to get pieced up. That's just my prediction. Yeah. Horiguchi by decision. Who do you got?
Yeah, fuck it.
You going with it too?
Yeah, I want the story to be like good for Sergio Pettis, but
Dude, I love Sergio. We've met him. He's a cool guy.
Tough fight.
But keeping it real.
Well, that's the thing, though. Is like I think he has the opportunity. Like I wouldn't be like super surprised if Sergio pulled off a decision win.
Dude, I'll be happy if he does. I like Sergio
think-
Pettis.
I
The fan in me would rather he won, but the MMA thinker in me is Horiguchi. Yeah.
I agree.
I think he's really, really come into.
He's fucking good, man.
I mean, geez, he's even beat guys like Ian McCall since then.
Yeah.
I mean, Ian McCall's a tough out. I mean, he should still be fighting. He's smart enough to be worried about his brain. But Ian McCall is a very, very. I mean, shit, he beat Demetrius Johnson in that draw. Everybody knows that. It was that stupid scoring error. That fucked it up. But he never got it back after. However, I'm just saying, Horiguchi.
I don't know. I like him, but I feel like the UFC has gotten so deep at 135. I think it would still be it'd be hard.
Well, he ain't never coming back, so.
You know what I mean, though.
Something. We'll
I'm just saying, where like pound for pound ranking across like all promotions here, like where would you rank him?
Top 5.
Think so?
Yeah, but I can't say number 1. I'd say number 1 outside the UFC.
Outside the UFC, I agree. He's probably number 1.
Yeah,
but
in there when you're talking
like,
UFC's top 5,
you're talking about like Dillashaw, Jan, Aljo, freaking all these guys. Like it's hard to Rob Font, Jose Aldo, fucking even Frankie Edgar. Like those are
even
all
those
like,
top 3 of Aljo, because he's technically
Corey
the title holder.
Sandhagen, like
Jan,
jeez,
and
killers at 35, bro. Like killers, straight killers. That's the only reason. Like I'll give him his due. He's like you said. I think he's the best bantamweight outside of the UFC, but I don't know. I feel like the UFC has gotten so deep at 135 that it's hard to say he's like top 5 in the world at 135. Either of these guys at this point.
Well, let's close out Bellator. There's a lot of other action on the card. We'd encourage everybody to check it out if you're interested, but not a lot for us to talk about. And let's shift a little bit into boxing. We had an absolutely outstanding fight that a lot of people had kind of written off, which was Teófimo López coming off his victory of Vasily Lomachenko, finally against mandatory contender or mandatory defense against George Kambosos. Look, we had 8 date changes along with all kinds of stops and starts at training camps. And like we said, it was supposed to be a mismatch against Lopez, the rising star, and it wound up being an excellent, amazing fight, with a stunning upset, with Kambosos winning all of the titles and Lopez being one of the one of the worst losers so far that we've seen in boxing that I can think of lately as a champion. I've just been terrible since he lost. However, let's put a pin in that and talk about the fight itself. You know, Lopez had promised a first-round knockout.
He's damn sure tried for it.
And boy, was he winging some shots, wasn't he?
Yeah, I feel like that was his ultimate undoing in most of the fight. I just felt like he was throwing everything, like he was just trying to get him out of there quick. And I feel like that was his biggest mistake.
He threw 55 punches total in round one. He landed 20. And, I mean, 18 of those were power punches on Lopez. And he was winging.
Yeah.
But the shocking thing of round one was you had Lopez winging these shots and landing some. And actually landing quite a few. At one point, you know, he was backing Kambosos up and landed 4 clean right hands that George was just got a chin from hell.
Yeah.
8. And then George immediately fires back with a 1-2 with the 2 being just this massive right hand that fucking puts Teófimo López on his ass.
Yeah.
So he's the guy that goes down. Now there was I don't think it was ruled a knockdown at the ass end of that, because this was like with 13 seconds left, Lopez gets floored with a very clean shot.
Yeah.
He gets up, and then there was a knockdown of George, but it seemed much more like a stumble to me, and I can't remember what it was ultimately ruled.
Yeah.
But the fight has a lot of back and forth, but after 4 rounds, I really thought Lopez started to fade. I don't know if it was due to the stop and starting of all these camps, if it's due to his battles with COVID, or if it was due to him just not taking this kid seriously. But it winds up being a split decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was controversy there in our mind, right? But what's the controversy? The controversy is how one judge could score at 114, 113 for Lopez, right? I didn't see it that way, personally.
I didn't either, but
now,
like
you said you thought you had an argument for that?
Well, it's not even, I don't even have an argument for that. I just feel like that's not, there's been a lot more egregious scores in boxing as of late, and that's not that bad of one. Like, I get it. Like, there was a couple rounds where, like, both guys were so, like, active that you could have just, like, kind of, like, coin flipped. But, like, at the same time, I did not score it for Lopez.
Well, the other two had it 115, 112, and 115, 111. You had Kambosos surviving a 10th round knockdown to get that split decision victory.
Yep.
And he claims the WBO, WBA, IBF, and WBC franchise lightweight championship, as well as the ring belt on top of that. And he's already got his eyes set on Devin Haney, who has the missing belt to this pile of letters, correct? I mean, that's what it is. It's just the add the ring in there. But I thought the fight was excellent. Now let's talk about Lopez after the fight. Like, they do the interview with Kambosos first, who is very complimentary towards Lopez, who then interrupts, and they start doing an interview with Lopez, who claims right away that it was bullshit. He thought he won 10-2, 11-1. He says, no, at first he says 11-2, then 10-2. And he realizes you can't win 11-2. But I mean, that's
the
crazy.
overtime round.
Then afterwards, in the press conference, he continues talking shit that he clearly won the fight. His father backs him up on this. They go on Twitter, they do all this shit. And as of this recording now, he's actually deleted his Twitter account because he's getting met with a flat rejection of that statement by fans and panelists and the boxing community alike. Like, he got booed in his hometown for saying that shit. He got booed at the fight. He got lit up on fucking Twitter by not just fans, other boxers. I mean, nobody fucking thinks he won that fight. Yeah. Nobody thinks that this is controversial at all, except Lopez, which is disappointing.
Yeah, it's disappointing, and it's like also, I think it's a mixture of things. Because, I don't know, it's weird to say this because, it's his family at the end of the day, but I think he needs to get, not get rid of his dad.
Needs a different camp?
Not even a different camp. It's not even that he needs that. It's just like I feel like he needs to tell his dad, like, "Hey, dog, you gotta take a little bit of a step back, bro. Like, you're fucking getting a little too into his head." Because like that's kind of been their shtick, like lately. Like he talks shit on him. His dad talks shit to them. Like, hey, man, he's a grown man. Let him fucking take care of his own business, But
well, Lopez comes out with a litany of excuses afterwards while saying, I won the fight, but I'm not a sore loser. But I'm a true champ. I won. And, and then, of course, we all know that he had the career-long layoff, the COVID and all that. But then he also starts talking about the 135-pound limit is too draining for him. And then he and his father say that they won the fight and they're moving on. They're not going to try and get a rematch. So he's probably going to go up in weight, which is fine with me. Like, look, we've been high on fucking Lopez
No, I
for a
think
long
he's still
time.
great.
He's awesome. We predicted his victory over Lomachenko on this show.
Yeah.
We've written about him for Slugfest magazine. He's a great fighter with a bright future. I just don't like the way he lost.
I don't like how he handled this at all.
He handled it shitty. But go ahead and just move on then. I don't have a problem with that. Move up in weight. Go fight somebody else. And let's see Kambosos fight if Haney wins in his upcoming bout here. Lopez is going to be it. If he wins, let's see him fight the winner of that bout. Let's get all these things unified.
Yeah, that'd be a nice little chunk of change too for it.
The stats back it up too. If you just go at pure numbers thrown, you've got 182 to 176 in favor of Kambosos.
Yeah,
he was out jabbed. As far as jabs landed, 27 to 61, which is, he only landed 8% of his jabs, but on power shots, he outlanded Lopez 155 to 115. Which is for the most part where it counts.
That's where the fight. Yeah,
and he wobbled him pretty good in the fourth as well towards the end.
I feel like it's just a game of attrition with those two. It's like if you look at the punch stats, Kambosos threw damn near 400 power shots. Like
yeah, like 392. Yeah,
like that's just I'll meet you at your own game. Because if you look at it, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, with Lopez coming out so fast, I feel like when these smaller guys, when you come out fast like that, they're so quick to meet each other's energy, because then if you can take someone's better shots, it just turns into a who's got a better gas tank kind of fight with these kind of guys. They're out there just so active. It's
if you look at the last two rounds, that speaks to what you just said about him being so active, and what I was saying earlier about Lopez just being lethargic over the final 8 rounds, especially in the last two, where he was outlanded by Kambosos 41 to 16. In the final 2 rounds.
Yeah, well, when you look at the last round too, Lopez literally was 9 of 75 punches.
Right.
That's fucking ridiculous. That just is a joke, complete joke.
Yeah, he's just winging shots everywhere.
Yeah.
And getting outboxed. So, neither one of us. I didn't give him a chance to win. I thought Lopez
I didn't either.
was come out and be serious and do his thing. And it's exciting when you can see a fighter rise to an occasion like that. Like Kambosos, he had just as many hurdles as Lopez did with the cancellations and the fight camps starting and stopping and et cetera, et cetera. And he also had the birth of his son during this period, and he also had the death of his grandfather during this period, and which were things that, could be major life changes. And he still remained focused and came out and did what he had to do in a really impressive victory. So I'm excited for the division, and frankly, let's see Lopez move up in weight. I like that as well. So,
well, also I think he needs to just tone down a little bit. Has Dad just tone down just a bit.
Well, let's talk about this.
That's added pressure that he just doesn't even need.
We see these relationships in boxing a lot, and sometimes they work out well, and sometimes it can be very difficult. And you feel like this is kind of crossing into the difficult area where,
not necessarily yet, but it could get there soon. Because I did think in the corner he wasn't given very much like technical. It was a lot more like vibe. You know what I mean? Like he was kind of trying to keep him more lively. Like, oh yeah, you got this. Blah blah. I didn't really see him like really making very many like tactical changes with it. You know what I mean?
Working with your family in any occupation is very difficult.
Because the emotion is there.
Yeah, and especially when it's a father-son in the fight game, it's very, very hard for these guys to remain critical of their children or not overly critical, to walk that fine line. And sometimes it's
a complete opposite.
It's difficult to see the flaws too. You can be too much, too little. It's way harder, and I think that's why you don't see it too much. I mean, we've got Porter and his dad who seem to have a good relationship, even though at the end,
last week,
Sean was not angry, but he felt he could have gone on, but he wasn't pissed like the way Deontay Wilder took his corner, which had nothing to do with family in his case, but it was a bad reaction to a corner stoppage. But I think you're right. I think there comes a time in boxers and in MMA fighters, for that matter, where they've just been at a certain camp for too long, whether it's their dad and their family or not. And maybe it's time for Lopez to think about switching things up, you think? At least with a head trainer?
Not even just, not even like get rid of his dad, just like maybe have him take a bit of a step back.
Do you like the idea of him fighting the winner of, I'm sorry, I can't even remember who Devin Haney's fighting. That's terrible right now, but we're all going to assume it's going to be Haney from what I understand. He's going to be there. You like him fighting the winner of that fight and just unifying all these titles?
Yeah, I think that would make the most sense.
You think Lomachenko's going to come up and try and make noise again? Because he was talking about, 130.
Could happen.
It'd be interesting. He might feel that he might have an easy win in Kambosos, which I don't think he would. But he might also feel Kambosos might like that as a possibility of a big fight, especially if he picks up this next belt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but honestly, I feel like if he fights Haney first, it makes that fight an even bigger fight. You know what I mean? Like if he picks up all the belts and then Loma fights him after that, then it's like it's a whole different fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of fathers in boxing, it reminded me of something that I want to talk about real quick, which is, we've got the Jake Paul Tommy Fury bout coming up here in December, which we're actually going to touch on a little bit. It's the 18th.
I thought it was the 12th. Yeah. I keep fucking thinking it's on the 12th. Things are on the 12th lately. I don't know why.
Yeah, and we're still 2 weeks away from then, roughly from it. But there was a big press conference that was done streaming.
Yeah.
Which was very strange because all the Furies showed up. Well, by all the Furies, we mean John Fury, the dad, Tyson Fury, the brother, and then, of course, Tommy. Everybody keeps trying to make the distinction half-brother. I don't know. Do we need to make that distinction? This is brother, whatever. So, but
they share one parent.
You had John Fury, who is not a trainer for his son, but is an advisor. And I'm assuming he's the same type of role. Yeah, with Tyson. The same type of role with Tommy, I assume. But John Fury gets, he doesn't set the tone for where his sons go. Like we've seen Tyson openly disagree with his father, fire his trainer, and bring in somebody else.
Yeah.
Like from what I remember, he wasn't for the Ben Davison change, but it did work out well. And Tyson's his own man and does what he wants while just listening to his father's advice, which I think is a better role.
Yeah.
For a parent in boxing versus being a trainer. Just my opinion. Haven't been in the gym myself, not with my father, but I've trained with guys who their dad was the head trainer at the gym. Like my head trainer in Colorado Springs was a guy named Manny Martinez, and his son Dwayne Martinez was a fucking big fighter at the gym too. And even then, it's a different thing when it's your dad and they're hitting pads with you, and it's your dad telling you what to do than it is with us, the other fighters, who manages the head coach.
Yeah,
and I always wondered about that. Just that dynamic for me is very interesting, and I don't recommend it personally. But.
Yeah, it just doesn't ever really seem like the way to go.
But these guys are winning world titles, so what the hell?
Yeah,
but I think that's more to do with the skill of the boxer than.
It's not even. I just feel like for just like his technicality of his game, I feel like he needs to not get rid of his dad, but I feel like another voice in his ear as far as like in the corner would be a good idea. Or like not even getting rid, or even getting another coach. He could just rotate his corner. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure he has other guys he trains with that aren't like every fighter has like a litany of trainers. Obviously, you know what I mean. And obviously, one's the head coach, and the others are kind of more advisors. I feel like maybe he should just kind of switch everyone's titles up a bit. He doesn't need to get rid of anybody. He doesn't need to switch camps. He's doing the right thing. He's great, but I just feel like his dad's a little bit more like too emotional sometimes when he's fighting, and like I feel like he was a little in denial of like what was really going on in the ring on Saturday. You know what I mean? It was like you got this, champ. Like you're gonna do this. You're gonna walk him down. You're gonna like. He just kind of was telling him to do the fucking same shit he was doing every round, and wasn't winning him the fight. You know what I mean? Like,
and and I think that about sums it up. One thing I do want to mention, I was unaware of this when it comes to John Fury and his sons. And this, you had he had Jake Paul talking shit to John Fury personally, which isn't a very good idea. Do you know anything about Fury and his story? Like this was news to me. Like I heard he was like a bad motherfucker, but like he did 11 years in the pen. Do you know what for?
Assault.
Yeah. There was an 11-year, from what I understand. I may have some of these details wrong, but you know, they're gypsy travelers, right? And you don't fuck with those people anyways. And he had an 11-year feud with some other guy that culminated when they met up, and John Fury got him in a headlock and then reached his hand around and plucked out his goddamn eye.
Jesus Christ.
And did 11 years on assault for fucking that shit.
That's intense.
Yeah, that's a bad. Like he's a big dude. You can tell he's a no nonsense motherfucker who's raising fighting sons, and he's a fighting goddamn traveling gypsy. He's the wrong person to fuck with, anyways. But he's also that guy that will end the feud by putting you in a headlock and gouging out your eye and just go do the fucking time.
Yeah, go do the fucking.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's you don't fuck with people like that. Like Jake Paul, you best.
You should have heard what Tyson said.
Save it for Tommy.
Kid Tyson said on the. He's been in like every press conference for some reason, but he goes, yeah, I already told my brother if he loses this fight, you better just go pack up and live on an island because he'll never hear the end of it.
Yeah. I don't look. Tommy is still a raw fighter.
He is,
but he's more of a fighter than motherfucking Jake Paul. I'll give Jake Paul credit if he wins this fight. I'll have to.
I guess.
I don't see anywhere. I see him getting KO'd, man. He's fighting a kid that fights at light heavyweight and cruiserweight. He's big. I mean, I was watching footage of Tommy sparring with a 6'7" motherfucker, and his defense was sharp, man.
I think he's gonna win by decision. I don't think he knocks Jake out just because. I don't know.
Remember Jake running from Tyron Woodley? Yeah. I mean, Woodley knocked him down, and then Paul honestly ran the rest of that fight.
Yeah, like that.
I don't know if he gets pieced up. I don't know if he's got the heart to stand in there and take it. If he couldn't take one from a 40-year-old retired MMA fighter, I don't know if you can take a punch from a real boxer. Fucking young, powerful kid.
It's the same size as you.
You're right. He's been fighting all these people he's way bigger than, you know?
Yeah. He fought Nate Robinson, who's like 5 feet tall. He fought Ben Askren, who's 170 pounds. He fought Tyron Woodley, who's 175 or 170
5'9", 170 pounds. Yeah.
Now he's fighting a dude who's actually his size, and he's tall, and rangy,
and grew up boxing.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's just a big difference when you're a born fighter. There's a big difference in when you're a rich kid who picked it up later. I don't care what kind of dedication you show in the gym, and you can see that even with guys like Brock Lesnar. Okay, Brock Lesnar's a tough man, right? There's no denying that. But look, he got into fighting. And then it's different than wrestling when you start getting punched in the fucking face.
Well, not only
and you
that,
you can say a lot about Brock, but everybody knows he hated getting punched in the fucking face, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know if Jake Paul, after seeing Woodley, him take a little bit of damage and not reacting well, I don't think he's got it.
Well, that's the thing too, is I think that there's being an athletic person at the end of the day, than having like an athlete's mindset and like abilities and stuff like that. And then there's also being like just like having a craft and perfecting a craft. You know what I mean? So like that's really where you're like finding the difference here. Like, yeah, Jake, you could tell, just like him and his brother, they have good genes. They're athletic individuals, both of them. You know what I mean? So like they have athletic ability. So now that he's chose to focus on boxing, you're seeing, oh wow, he's progressing all this stuff because he's got good people around him and has good work ethic.
Smart matchmaking.
Yeah, that too. But I'm just saying at the smallest level, take his actual boxing career out of this. I'm just talking about his ability to like train and shit like that. Like obviously he works hard in the gym and he like is trying to be better for sure, right? But he's only been doing it for 3 years, so that's where the whole like I agree with you like on the Brock Lesnar thing. Brock Lesnar was like a ridiculous athlete, but in all reality, he only trained MMA for like 2 years and then tried to be an MMA fighter.
And when you're in the grind of the MMA fight, not the wrestling, not your gym fucking sparring, but You've got some person kicking your fucking ass, and you're getting pummeled upside your head. You're getting
It's
rattled
different,
like
yeah.
you've never been rattled before in practice.
Yeah.
It's different, man. It's just is, especially when you have money and you don't have to do it to get fucking paid. See, Brock didn't have to do it to get paid. He wanted to add to his millions. Jake Paul don't need to do it to get paid. That kid's fucking a millionaire already. They're just doing this to make more money.
For
And
notoriety,
kudos on
yeah.
all that. But you're not the fucking hungry young kid who has to do it or go
Yeah.
home and have no fucking future,
Yeah.
no nothing else, and he's got to dig deep because
Yeah.
of that. You're the guy that's like, dude, I live in luxury at home, bro. You know.
But
us.
I hate to tell you, honestly, that's kind of how Tommy is too, though.
I don't
Tommy's
know,
been
I
on
don't know.
that fucking over in the. He's a huge star over
Yeah,
there.
he's like a reality TV
He's
star.
a
and
huge
shit,
reality
too, but
TV star.
he's also a gypsy fucking traveler in a
Yeah.
fighting family. That's just a different growing up. I mean, fighting is kind of a part of your life.
Yeah, I
over
feel
there.
that.
I mean, not necessarily professional bouts is what I mean.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting when we
It
get to
will be
that. But just talking about fathers reminded me of John, and just what a fucking savage.
Yeah,
man.
dude's a savage for that. That's crazy.
Like that's. I'm sure that
Savage
dude
shit.
was a fucking boss in prison. I can just imagine his big ass
Big
calling
cue ball.
shots.
He's a fucking. That dude's fucking crazy. Have you ever seen those like round table discussions, like with that they do on YouTube? Dude, he
I
just
have.
he just goes crazy sometimes. And he's just like, "You're not worth shit." Like, it's like, I bet my whole
Yeah.
life you like. He gets crazy, dude. You should have saw the one with Fury and Wilder the second time.
I didn't watch the second round.
Oh my god, dude! He was telling David Hay that he'd bet his whole life savings that that Tyson could beat him and Wilder at the same night. He was like going after him. It was hilarious.
Yeah, he's a motherfucker, man. That's a fighting ass family. Well, we'll talk about that because we have to a bit as it gets a little closer. But I think that wraps up boxing.
Yeah.
For right now, let's shift back into the upcoming UFC, which we're kind of staying in that same weight division
135 pounds.
that we were talking earlier with 135 pounds, which sees a pivotal matchup here on this fight night from the Apex here in Vegas, where we've got surging Rob Font getting the big fight against Jose Aldo, having turned down the opportunity to fight for the interim belt, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah, very, very interesting. You know, my biggest take on this fight is like, what are the consequences though of this fight? Like, let's just be honest. Let's take a look just real quick, like where we're at 135 pounds. So you have Aljamain Sterling, who's the champion, who's kind of, you know, he's on
He's
injury
currently
leave.
out
Yeah.
on injury.
Who knows what the
yes.
timetable is for that? Then you
Nobody.
have Peter Yan, who just won the interim title against Corey Sandhagen, who wasn't really supposed to fight for the title because he was coming off a loss to Dillashaw, who everybody thought that was the number one contender fight for the 135-pound belt. And also you have Dillashaw, who's also injured and can't fight until next year. So then now you have Font, who's sitting at 3, and so what happens if he wins this fight? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many people in the queue. Are we gonna have an interim champion defend his title? Is that what's gonna happen?
I'm thinking that's the most likely scenario, in my opinion.
Has that ever happened before?
Yes, it has.
Oh, I think it was Frank Mir. Wasn't it
Frank Mir defended as well as Henan Barao defended
Okay.
as also.
Okay.
And there might be others, but I know those two definitely did.
Yeah, but that could be the situation we end up in at this point because who really is there either ready to fight or available to fight outside of Rob Font and Peter Yan after Saturday. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
because Cody Garbrandt's basically left the division. He's making his debut at flyweight here soon. And then once you get past Aldo, I mean, Sandhagen's coming off the losses.
Yeah.
You've got Pedro Munoz, Marlon Moraes, Dominic Cruz,
And
Marlon
Cruz and
Vera,
Munoz are fighting each other anyways
Rafael
already.
Sansao, Frankie Edgar, Song Yadong, and Corey Stamen. And that's the whole top 15.
And everyone's either booked or is hurt.
Yeah.
Or coming
so
off a loss.
10 and up. Cruz is coming in at 10. Moraes is coming off Dude, he just hasn't looked good. I mean,
Yeah,
he's not
been
getting
really
a title
rough.
shot anytime soon. Garbrandt's out of it. There's Merab Dolshavasuli, or however you say his name.
Yeah.
He's looking tough.
Yeah, but he hasn't
But-
had like a signature win that would like, you know,
No. Mm-mm.
vault him into some situation. So like literally, we're gonna have to see an interim title defended at this point.
Yeah, we are.
I think the winner. I actually no, I don't think if Aldo wins, that's probably would keep the balance of the division. But if Rob Font keeps doing what he's doing and gets Aldo out of there, like
Well, let's take a closer look at that matchup. We've got Font at 19-4, Aldo at 30-7 losses.
Yeah.
If you look at their most recent fights, though, it tells a bit of a tale. Let's look at their last 5. If you're going back 5 fights, you had a loss for Rob Font to Rafael Assunção,
yeah,
who at that time was top 3.
yeah, it was a good fight too.
He had a win over Sergio Pettis in his next fight, the current champ we were just talking about earlier in the show, now over in Bellator. He's got a win over Ricky Simon. Then he beat the aforementioned Marlon Moraes we were just talking about. And then he beat the aforementioned Cody Garbrandt, former champ we were just talking about, who's now dropped down to flyweight after that. But then when we get to Aldo, it's a bit of a different story. I mean, you go back 5 fights, you've got his loss, featherweight to Volkanovski, and then the loss to Marlon Moraes, controversial or not, and the loss to Peter Yan, so 3 in a row. And then he gets a win over Marlon Vera, and then the win over Pedro Munoz.
And the really only dominant win for him in that whole like last 5 was probably the Vera fight. And it wasn't too dominant. It was a good fight overall, but like I don't know.
And that was after
think he's,
Vera
like,
just
great.
made his debut into the top 15.
Yeah.
Coming off of O'Malley. So I think momentum and age and even the statistics here all favor Rob Font in this matchup. I mean, they're about the same size. They're both orthodox. They're even roughly the same age. But when it comes to strikes landed per minute, you would think that Aldo would have the advantage here at about 3.5. But actually, it's Rob Font striking at almost 6 strikes landed per minute at 5.58, which is pretty impressive with an accuracy of 43%, which is equal with Aldo's 45%.
And that's how Aldo beats him. Those are like considered classic Aldo fights, and the fights where Aldo puts that pace on people and he hits people with a lot of combos. But I wonder it's weird when you say at this age with Aldo because he's really not that old, but
They're
he's
the same age,
his
but-
octagon age is a lot older than Rob Font's for sure.
Right.
And I
23
wonder
fights to 37 fights.
Yeah. So I wonder at this stage in his career, I guess would be the better way to say it, is if he's met with that same pace, how he's gonna react. Because we saw that with when he fought Max Holloway back to back, was he had trouble with Max because Max met his pace and he he just kind of broke down throughout the fight. So this being a 5-round fight in a main event, I'm curious to see if a pace is set by Font versus Aldo setting the pace, if he's going to be able to handle that pressure, because I think that was his biggest reason he won that Marlon Vera fight originally, was because he set a pace and Marlon didn't necessarily get super behind, but he just got behind on the cards. Because what happens when you have a guy like Aldo who lands 4 strikes a minute, he's just over here literally just throwing constantly, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's just what it
He's
comes
not
down
going to have that advantage here with Rob Font. And when you look a little further into the stats, I mean, their defensive stats are equal.
Yeah.
But when it comes to grappling, Font gets more takedowns, almost at a 2-to-1 ratio.
I don't see this fight going to the ground at all.
I doubt that it does either, but he's got more takedowns and more sub attempts than Aldo does, clearly, and he's got a much better streak. And I just still feel Aldo's a little over the hill. I mean, I know he's right there and hanging in with these guys, and there's controversy in some of his losses, but I'm just not sold on it anymore. I think I was never really big on him at this weight class, and I know he's come in and he's hung around, but I don't think he gets past Font here. I think this is Rob Font's signature win.
I think so too.
He will likely start demanding a title shot against the interim winner, is what I predict, because I don't think we're going to see Aljamain Sterling. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a fucked up situation too, because we just think about, what was it? maybe 4 months ago, we're sitting here talking about how there was no way that anybody else could fight for the belt except TJ Dillashaw.
Mm-hmm.
And now with him being hurt and this fight happening and the whole interim fight happening and him being not available to fight for that interim title,
Gets ridiculous.
I think he's completely skipped in line.
He could be the odd man out here. We'll see.
Like, honestly.
It's a shitty spot for the division to be in. First with the disqualification of Peter Yan.
Yeah,
I mean, and I'm not throwing shade at either of them for that. I'm just saying the situation fucked
Yeah.
the division all up.
Yeah.
Because then you had it compounded by Aljamain Sterling's injury.
Mm-hmm.
And now
like
we're just now another interim belt. And it was all fucked up anyways because TJ Dillashaw gets caught doing drugs at the weight class below.
Yeah.
You know, like for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Which I was never a fan of that fight either. I never wanted his dumb ass to drop down and fight Cejudo anyways, because you're
He
too
got
big to
knocked
get
out.
down to
Like, what are
fucking
you doing?
125 anyways, bro.
Yeah.
You're like, stop.
He was like chasing a legacy thing, and then also
Right.
like you fucked it up because you made yourself look dumb. Honestly, he fucked his legacy up more than he ever could have.
Absolutely. It's the worst thing he could have
He
done.
moved
for his
down.
career.
He got knocked out. He took steroids, and he got suspended and got his belt taken away.
Then he comes back, looks good, gets injured, and now might get just
He
talked
might
right out
just
of the
get
title
skipped in
picture.
line by Rob Font at this point. Because if Rob Font comes out here and just puts a pace on Aldo and just Aldo crumbles in like 4 rounds, that's all. There's no fucking way that you give anybody else a title shot other than Rob Font after that. Like, there's no way.
Mm-mm.
There's no way.
Well, that's what I predict. My prediction is a Rob Font victory, but by decision.
I think he TKOs him in the 4th round.
You think Font TKOs Aldo?
Yeah, I don't. I think we saw it in the freaking Volkanovski fight and then both the Max fights. When you meet Aldo's pace, I don't think his body can hold up anymore.
I agree with that. I think his
Over
chin's
5
got a little
rounds.
bit left
Over
if you're
5
not
rounds. We
Conor,
saw it in the
but-
Yan fight too.
Yeah.
Over 5 rounds. 3-round fights like the Moraes one and like that was a good fight with like a high pace. But like even in that fight, he got wobbled. So I think in 5-round
he did.
fights, 5-round fights, I don't think his body can hold up anymore like it used to. And he's never had a good gas tank really, ever. He's always been known for coasting in the last he always comes out hot and coasts in the last 2 rounds.
And if he loses here, he's going to be 1 win and 3 defeats as a bantamweight, regardless of how much you want to say how tough the competition was or any controversy of those. That'll be the facts.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're just damaging your legacy because 5 years from now, they're just going to look at the record. Be like, went on the bantamweight, went 1 and 3.
True.
I mean, is he going to keep pushing through? Is he going to retire? Like you said, he's 1 year old. He's 6 months older than Rob Font, but Jesus, it feels like Aldo's in his 40s.
Well, dude, think about how many 5-round fights he's had in his career. Think
Course.
about how much I'd like look that up. How much octagon time he has? I want to know, because that could tell the whole story right there.
Yeah, his time in the cage across WEC and UFC. If you could get that stat instead of just the octagon, the
Yeah.
UFC time, I'm sure it's quite a bit. I don't remember seeing him in the all-time list. I think Frankie Edgar just crossed that at like 8 hours.
Well, how would I even look that up?
Yeah, I don't know. You're probably not going to be able to find that real easily, but he does have a lot of time. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. I think that is really okay. Here it is. So, he spent 4 hours and 55 minutes in the cage.
Okay,
Over just his UFC career.
Yeah, so that's just got to be his UFC career. So, there's no way he's done that on 37 fights. But at any rate,
he's only fought like 10 times in the UFC.
You wanted to talk about the co-main event in this as well, correct? Brad Riddell versus
Brad Riddell versus Rafael Fiziev. That's going to be a really good fight.
Look, Riddell's coming in 10-1. Fiziev is 10-1. What do you like about this fight?
I think it's going to be a striking showcase. You got Riddell, who's he's one of Izzy's coaches, and he's also fights at the lightweight division. And then you got
he really impressed me in his last fight. Riddell, I was like, this is Izzy's coach, huh? And then he came out and looked really sharp.
Yeah.
I remember we watched it over at your place. Dude was looking good.
Yeah, and then Faziev is just a fucking savage. I feel like he's just a star in the making. He's interesting. He's good on the mic. He's got fucking sick ass defense. He's got so many clips on like Twitter and all the different like sites of him doing that crazy Matrix like defense when he people throw front kicks at him, and he like it works too. Like he fucking
He's coming off that victory over Bobby Green.
and that fight was sick, dude.
Mhm,
Him and Bobby
mhm.
Green fucking threw down. He's like he's so like fun to watch. He just like is down to fucking just throw. That's why I like watching him. If people haven't seen his fights, just go on YouTube and watch it. He's a fucking savage.
Do you think he's going to pull off the victory in this?
I hope. I think so. Because I think the more he moves up the ladder, we could see some really, really like really interesting fights for him at lightweight.
There's a fight on here I also find interesting. Clay Guida is fighting against Leonardo Santos, which is interesting to me because Clay Guida is on the short side at 5'6", and he's fighting a 6 foot tall guy who has not only 5 inches in height on him, but 5 inches in reach as well. And sometimes these fights can prove pretty interesting.
I think Clay just tries to take him down the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, Clay's known for grinding out that wrestling, and he's going to have so much leg in front of him, I presume. However, Santos is, I mean, he's no slouch. If he can keep him off and keep it at a striking battle and you know, utilize some knees coming in on Guida or some nice rangy punching and kicking, he might be able to keep him at bay.
Yeah.
And Guida,
a couple of old guys, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say Guida's old at 39, but Santos is 41. So I mean, they've both put in the work. But Guida's got a lot more fights. I mean, what is his record these days? He's 36 and 18 compared to Santos's 18, 5 and 1.
Yeah.
I mean, his fight
it's a shit
time
ton
is.
more.
Well, he's been around as long as I can remember. But I just find the dynamics of those fights interesting when you've got a really tall guy against a much shorter guy. A guy too short for the weight class against a guy who's probably a little too tall for the weight class. And this is back at 155, which is good for Clay. You know, he didn't have a hard time making 45 at 5'6", but I think his gas tank is better at 55.
Yeah.
So, and that's his big thing is the constant movement and the constant gas tank and the pressure. So I think that's an interesting fight. You know, this card isn't spectacular, but there's a few on there. There's Jimmy Crute versus Hill. Yeah, that's a good fight. Good. I mean, Hill is coming in at what? He's still pretty young. He's 8 and 1.
Damn, his arm healed that quick.
Yeah, that's fast, man. Jimmy Crute's 12 and 2. You know, both of these guys are at a point where they can make a statement at 205.
Yeah.
In a division that could use some fresh names coming into the mix.
Crute's coming off that loss to Anthony Smith, I think, right?
Sure is.
Yeah. So this is a good chance for him to really get back on track.
All in all, it's a decent little card for a fight night. So.
Yeah, it's pretty damn good.
So we'll be talking about that next week. Next week, we're also going to be talking BKFC will be coming up. We'll discuss that, as well as we've got the BKFC Thailand making their first event, which I find pretty interesting. BKFC branching out worldwide with a separate yet promotion under the same banner. Like it's not a BKFC event taking place in Thailand. This is BKFC Thailand event number 1.
Yeah.
Which is a separate promotion, like a sister promotion under the BKFC banner. And I'm really curious how that's going to unfold. But I think that market over there in Thailand
should be interesting.
Dude, I mean, they've got so much Muay Thai over there.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of bare knuckle over there already, don't they? I don't mean necessarily boxing, but they have bare knuckle events in Thailand.
Of shit. Yeah, there's all kinds of fights.
There's all kinds of raw fucking fighting in Thailand. I think it's a great location for BKFC where they're not going to have some of the stigma that they have here in the States, where people incorrectly, in my opinion, think that it's more dangerous or just more brutal, you know, more like it's not as civilized because they don't have gloves on. Where actually, you know, statistics show that it's safer for the fighters. They might get more facial lacerations, but they suffer less head trauma because people don't punch as hard. You punch harder when you have gloves on. Because you don't worry about damaging your fists. Yeah. And you can break your hands a lot easier in BKFC, which might sound bad, but it's better to have hand trauma than head trauma. Trust me. For sure. So I'm excited to see how that's unfolding. There's a BKFC Miami is coming up on December 9th, which we'll talk about next week. And then the BKFC Thailand, I believe, is December 18th. And we're working on it, but we should have some of those fighters and maybe even the president of BKFC Thailand on the show, hopefully as soon as next week. So we've got that in the works, everybody. And I think that wraps us for today.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for tuning in. If you're brand new, you can get all the information on our show and where to find us, including all major podcast outlets and a couple radio stations. It's all put together in one handy spot.
SWATandMade.com, where you can head over there, click the gear button, and support the podcast.
You can also find us on Instagram at SWAT MMA Podcast. See you next week.